From UFOs to psychic powers and government conspiracies, history is riddled with unexplained events. You can turn back now or learn the stuff they don't want you to know. A production of iHeartRadio.
Hello, welcome back to the show. My name is Matt.
My name is Noel.
They call me Ben. We're joined as always with our super producer, Dylan the Tennessee Pal Fagan. Most importantly, you are here. That makes this the stuff they don't want you to know. If you are joining our listener mail program, the evening it publishes, folks, friends, and neighbors, welcome to June 19th. It is almost birthday season for us, you guys. Not too long away.
Mm-hmm.
Getting older.
It's weird.
Right. So shout out, of course, again, to everybody for joining us. We're very excited about tonight's program. We're going to learn a lot from Palantir, or about Palantir, from some anonymous sources who reached out. Before we do anything, though, we'd like to pause for a word from our sponsors and then share a very bizarre story that a listener hipped us to earlier.
And we've returned. Guys, every once in a while, the fine folks who call in to the voicemail system leave us with something that it's a gem. That's the only way to describe it. It's a thing that personally, I don't think any of us have really delved into or even really heard of before, and it just sends us down a rabbit hole.
It scratches all the itches.
It's just, it's perfect. That is what John has gifted to us just a little bit before birthday season. So let us go to John and hear what he has to say.
Hey, good afternoon, guys. So my name is John. I'm calling from Connecticut. I have a story that's interesting, but it's a true story. In 1980, in New York City, there was a news show called Live at 5. I think it had Michelle Marsh and Roland somebody. And so they reported that this man was kidnapped, and his name was Leon Klinghoffer. He was kidnapped. He was held for ransom for $50,000. Turns out the cops stole the money out of the trash can where the money was supposedly left. And then they found Leon Klinghoffer's body along the side of a road, one of the highways, the Merritt Parkway or something similar to that. And they declared that he was murdered, and they arrested 3 people, and those 3 people were found guilty and put in jail. Now, fast forward 5 years, and maybe that name Leon Klinghoffer is familiar to you because it should be, or it could be. A man was on a cruise ship, the Achille Lauro, and he was a man in a wheelchair, an old guy, same bio. He was a liquor store owner. He was old. They had his picture on there. The terrorists threw him off the cruise ship into the water and killed him. They said his name is Leon Klinghoffer. Exactly the same guy. I was in shock. It's like they're trying to get away with this, killing Leon Klinghoffer twice. And I can't figure out why. I don't know why. I think my 3 minutes are nearly at an end. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. By the way, all this stuff is online. Pictures of the people who were arrested. Michelle Marsh on her newscast reporting on the kidnapping, reporting also 5 years later on the killing of Leon Klinghoffer on the Achille Lauro. It's all there. So it's kind of an interesting story. I can't figure it out. Thank you very much. Bye.
Dude.
Yes.
I said, when you sent me that, or when you sent us that, and I listened earlier today for the first time, I said, first off, out loud, what a lovely guy.
Yes.
To the caller, and just what a great man. What a gem, like you said.
John rules. Thank you, John, for, finding us, for spending some time with us, and for sending us in that awesome message and sending us down this trip.
John, I find you to be a credit to the great state of Connecticut.
Yeah, baby, Connecticut. I've never spent much time up there. Let's not get into that, because then I'll just start thinking about I need to go to Connecticut now. But guys, let's dive right into this. So we found a story from the New York Times, Section M, page 4, September 25th, 1980. The headline is 3 charged with kidnapping Bronx liquor dealer. And in this story, guys, maybe we should go through it a little bit just to set up the initial Leon Klinghoffer story, which was, by the way, definitely reported on by Michelle Marsh. You can find a bunch of information on her. She was an American broadcast journalist. She worked at, I think it was WCBS TV in New York City from 1979 onwards, and then jumped around. She was a journalist in a lot of different places for a long, long time. And that Roland somebody, by the way, is Roland Smith. You can look him up, ROLLAND SMITH.
And you found a half-hour video uploaded to YouTube of like an entire newscast from this era. And can I just say, in addition to it being an excellent source for this topic, it was just an awesome blast from the past, just seeing all the commercials and the like VHS-iness of it all. It was an absolute. I watched the whole thing just to kind of travel back in time. It was really neat.
Oh, yeah. And Michelle Marsh, by the way, before we even get into the story, she is a really interesting piece of American broadcast journalism, because she was the youngest person in a broadcast anchor position for a long time. It reminded me a lot of that Anchorman storyline, that film that I think all of us appreciate and love, maybe in some small way. Am I just saying I love it because I'm looking at the movie?
It's a fantastic piece of cinema, Anchorman. Also featuring our coworker, Will Ferrell.
That is correct. But anyway, so she is real. She did report on this. That is not John just imagining things. As he says in the message, you can find that stuff online. I could not find the specific video of Michelle Marsh and Roland reporting on this story. But as we said, we did find that New York Times piece that says exactly what happened. So let's jump into there and get our story straight. So in this story, it discusses a kidnapping of a, quote, 65-year-old retired liquor store owner for 10 days in the Bronx in New York City. It talks about a $50,000 ransom that was paid. It talks about the victim, name written out, Leon Klinghoffer. Let's spell it, Klinghoffer. And it says, sources close to the case say, quote, he is a loan shark and has not been found at this time on September 25th, 1980. There was an arrest of a man named Alan Futterman that it discusses in here, who was released because it was said that he did not have anything to do with it, or at least it appeared that he didn't have anything to do with it. It talks about two people who were arrested the day prior, William J. Cody, Barbara Daugherty, and George Carlo. So those were the three people that John talked about being arrested for this kidnapping. At this time, again, Leon Klinghoffer's body had not been recovered if he was in fact killed. I could not find the reporting about Leon Klinghoffer in 1980 being found dead. So that right there might be one of the key things to this story.
Interesting.
Maybe he wasn't killed.
Where did that come from? The reference to that? Because for some reason, in looking into this, I felt like I did see some reporting on finding his body.
Really? So I haven't found that, at least
Okay.
in the New York Times piece. The only one that I could actually find that you can look at the New York Times paper, from the reporting. And maybe I just didn't go deep enough to find the reporting of his body being recovered. There is a weird thing that John states about the money being taken out of the trash can by police, which is a little strange. Let's read this from the article directly. There's a quote in here from Mrs. Klinghoffer.
Yes, and this is thanks to journalist Joseph B. Treaster. I hope we're pronouncing that last name correctly. The following. Mrs. Klinghoffer told the police on September 15th that her husband had been kidnapped and a $100,000 ransom demanded. She said she could only raise $50,000, the sources said. Oh, and we should continue for the trash can story. Next quote, the kidnappers agreed and the money was dropped off in a refuse basket on 1st Avenue and East 63rd Street. A red van appeared, hesitated, then sped away.
Matt, what I saw was a reference to the next phase of this saga in terms of finding a body. Just FYI, I was thrown a little bit. I did find it. Yeah. Anyway, let's get to that.
Okay. Well, yeah. But then it states after that policemen watched the garbage can, but in the confusion, someone, presumably the kidnappers, took the money. So again, at this point during this stage of the reporting, somebody took the money, but they weren't sure who. There must be a whole other piece of this that perhaps Michelle Marsh did report on in 1980 that we just don't have access to currently. And the
FBI did chase the van, but they said they lost him in the Bronx.
That's right. But again, 3 people were arrested following all of this stuff, right? So theoretically, they found the people in the van and they, I guess, theoretically didn't have the money. Somebody did. Maybe it was a police officer, allegedly. We just don't know. So there's that story, right? That's September 1980. Where it gets really, really weird is that another news story broke. On October 7th, 1985, there's a cruise ship that, just as John said, the Achille Lauro, was hijacked, at least according to the New York Times, the Washington Post, all the major publications in the world at that time. It was hijacked, and a man named Leon Klinghoffer, who is described as, in 1985, a 69-year-old Jewish American who was wheelchair bound, was shot dead by the kidnappers and thrown overboard.
Matt, is it worth mentioning that it was hijacked by the Palestinian Liberation Front?
Yes.
It's interesting, because we're going to get into motive here at some point and the connections of these stories. But that part, I just thought it was worth mentioning.
Well, yeah, the strange thing for me is that if Leon Klinghoffer in the 1980 story did not pass away, and this is the same Leon Klinghoffer, their ages would match up almost perfectly if Leon hadn't had his birthday yet in 1985, right? Which is, I don't know. It's just, to me, that part is so strange. And then you start digging into stuff like the opera that was written and composed called The Death of Klinghoffer, that is all about the death of Leon Klinghoffer on the Achille Lauro and about that whole hostage situation that occurred on that ship at that time. It is a huge political and cultural moment, right? Which is just strange. I don't know. I'm trying to think back of other situations where people have called in or written in and talked about weird things where they're watching the news and they swear it's the same person talking about this one news story that they had just watched talking about another news story with a different name. And it's like the same person being interviewed, but they're in completely different places. They're different people, but they're like the eyewitness or one of the eyewitnesses for a thing. You've seen those before, right, guys? And that's on social media all the time.
It's also like a plot point in movies.
It
someone will
is.
be like, wait, it's that guy. What the hell? Yeah.
I know. So, maybe that's why this is hitting me so strangely. It feels like something that occurred in a time before you could just put that video up on YouTube or something,
For sure. Yeah.
I just don't know what else to say about this, guys. You can look yourself into the hijacking of the Achille Lauro. You can search Palestinian gunmen, hijack Achille Lauro. It's from the New York Times archive, but it's also created, I guess, I don't know, with the Learning Network, which was the thing a while back. It's kind of strange. It was published on October 7th, 2011. You can find that. You can also find in the New York Times archive another thing titled Ship Carrying 400 Seized, Hijackers Demand Release of 50 Palestinians in Israel, to get some of the initial reporting on that.
And the way that the aftermath, right, of the murder, the motivations for the murder, you can and should read more about those that happened to Klinghoffer number 2, we'll call him. Also did a little bit of cursory looking into name frequency. And folks, Klinghoffer is a relatively rare name. Just the surname itself, it's like 1 out of 20 million people in the world will have that surname. So it is not impossible that there are 2 Klinghoffers, because 56% of all the known Klinghoffers do reside in the United States. However, it is a lot. It's not your ordinary, Donnie Nguyen or John Smith situation.
About this case, it did, to the caller's point, have a cultural moment, and like it is something that we may well have heard of. I had not, but it was made into an opera, a theater production directed by Peter Sellers called The Death of Klinghoffer, that apparently has been kind of shelved or is really hard to see because it was accused, even by Klinghoffer's widow, of being anti-Semitic and glorifying terrorism.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. There's a whole thing you can read. There's a thing on Medium we found called Klinghoffer Cancellation Thoughts, written by David McDonald, which is really interesting. And you can read about the opera itself on Opera Wire, I think is where I saw something about it. They call it one of the most controversial operas ever created. Written by Alice Goodman and composed by John Adams.
Mm-hmm. And that is not Peter Sellers, the Peter Sellers of Dr. Strangelove fame. It's a different dude with an amazing hairdo. He's more of a modern theater guy.
Yeah. Well, hey, guys, there's a lot more to go into here. Anything else we want to talk about?
I think it's a fantastic history mystery. I mean, yeah, what's the deal? Are they the same guy? Because the original guy was a kind of a bad dude, right? Wasn't he like a bit of a criminal, kind of? Wasn't he painted as in that light in some of the reporting?
He's described by the New York Times as a loan shark.
A loan shark ain't
quote,
a good thing.
Yeah, quote, sources close to the case. refer to him as that, which is like
the dude who was killed on the ship just looked like a lovely old fella. But I guess, we know bad people sometimes grow into lovely old fellas. So who's to say?
The thing is with Klinghoffer II, he has a military record. So his early life is a little bit easier to track. Fun fact, he knew Jack Kirby, the legendary comic book artist.
Okay.
Wow. So at least we have a pretty stable or at least accepted bio of Leon Klinghoffer, who died on the Achille Lauro.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, well, that's good. Then perhaps we're just dealing with the same name, just strangely lining up with a bunch of other things. Very weird. And by the way, just one other thing, if you're interested in learning more about Michelle Marsh, you can find some fairly tragic, sad, but also awesome reporting about her when she passed away in 2017. You can just type in Michelle Marsh and learn about her struggle with breast cancer and her amazing career she had in broadcast journalism.
Incredible.
Okay, well, that's all for now. Thank you so much, John. Really cool stuff. We'll be right back after a word from our sponsor.
And we've returned with, I think, what'll be a good little preamble into Ben's listener mail section on Palantir. This is really a little more Palantir adjacent, and sort of all of our discussions around Palantir that triggered a really cool memory from our old buddy Foxillian Fastfoot. Fastfoot writes, "Hi, Matt, Ben, and Noel. I was just listening to your segment on Palantir, and I was reminded of a paper I wrote in 2019 in grad school for a data and analytics in politics class. In it, I explained that the one thing basically saving us from campaigns extorting voters by using AI to recognize patterns to discover personal vulnerabilities is the fact that no one company has a monopoly on personal data. Since Microsoft, Google, Apple, and Meta are to some extent siloed, there is no central clearinghouse one can use to train a data mining operation. With Palantir basically compiling everything about everyone, who knows how bad things will get. I half-jokingly said in a class discussion that there would be a point where we could ask, hey, Siri, what would be the political fallout of doing X? And we would get an answer. One classmate who worked in building software for the IRS laughed because she understood how right I was. And to give credit where it's due, I made this point by recalling how Ben, years ago, mentioned on the podcast a professor he had who was creating a geopolitical prediction model. I remember that too, Fastfoot. Now, with Palantir and the rise of generative AI, including the computer that threatened to reveal a programmer's affair, I can't help but feel like I, years ago, predicted a data dystopia, an alliteration I came up with in an early draft of the paper. Feel free to steal for what it's worth. I got an A in the class. As well you should have, Foxillian Fastfoot. What a fantastic point and prescient. Ben, I throw to you, sir, because I think the point about the predictive model that you discussed is very much another kind of proto-prediction of this kind of stuff that is seeming to enter a very slippery slope kind of period.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much, Foxillian Fastfoot, an old friend of the show and a friend of ours. We're past the Wild West precipice of large language predictive modeling, right? And what you are describing is very much on the way. I would argue, I don't know, my spidey sense says that something like this already exists. One thing we didn't mention for all the nerds in the crowd in our previous discussion on Palantir, I can't believe we talked about this so much, but we did not mention where the name comes from. And we all know a Palantir is a fictional poisoned magic crystal ball in Lord of the Rings.
I didn't know that. I did not make that connection at all. Mm-hmm. I guess I associate it with like the word paladin, or it did give me kind of those, sword and sorcery vibes, but not that. Wow.
Dude.
Yeah.
A little on the nose, isn't it?
It's a bit on the nose.
Yeah. It is, but I don't know, guys. I just think about the wordplay, intelligent, powerful people, and I don't know, man.
Poisoning society? With their magic?
We talk about words and their power, and I don't know. It's really interesting to make a seeing stone the name of your company.
Yeah, but it's all, I know, to that point, it's also, it's as though, Blackwater, instead of changing their name to Academi or XE, just changed their name to like Colonel Kurtz Consulting.
Yes.
You know, it's like they could have chosen a bunch of other names, but as we'll see later here, and perhaps even in an episode in the future, the CEO doesn't feel some of the same controversies that we all feel when we learn about Palantir.
Nobody does when they're on the inside, I think, right? Maybe not nobody, but they know what they did. But I'm with you on that, Ben. I think that's very true. There is a certain siloed kind of perspective on these things, or thinking that you're part of ushering in a new age, right? The question is whether or not we want that new age. But then you could also argue that there's a genie in the bottle kind of approach to looking at these things, where it is coming. Whatever it's going to be, it's coming. And, you know, you can either get on the train or get left behind. I'm somewhere in the middle. Like, I don't want to be a Luddite. I don't want to like be shouting at clouds or whatever, you know, but some of this stuff is scary, and there is a dystopian vibe to a lot of the way this stuff is just being so broadly applied. This machine learning stuff, and just there's seeming to be zero consideration given to the future of this stuff, and like concepts like privacy and just being human starting to seem really frivolous to some of these folks, you know? I don't know. It's because the CEOs are protected from the fallout. I don't think they even are, seeing the way that these AI models are interacting and starting to do real Terminator, Skynet-y type stuff. I mean, it doesn't seem like anybody would be safe, you know?
Right.
So the short-sightedness is just staggering to me, right?
Yeah, it's also prompting a long overdue, much needed conversation about the efficacy of C-suite, of CEOs, right? What is the value add there? Now, obviously, a lot of very smart people are CEOs. We know a few, and the ones we know are overall super cool. But it seems that what people learn in that echelon of society is often more about relationships, rapport, and connection. I know this guy from Harvard Business School, therefore I will be the CEO, right? And when we get to that conversation, then we really start to ask ourselves, how different would an AI CEO be? How different would an AI CFO be? I don't know.
One could argue potentially better.
One could, yeah. It would depend on the model, though.
And that's the problem that I have. It does seem like there are some, I mean, like, I think we should use AI to replace the top jobs, not the bottom jobs. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know.
I'm with you.
A different approach to thinking about AI, and like the like I said, there's a thing happening, and the question is, how's it going to be steered, and at what point do you know what I mean? Like, is there going to be responsible ways of harnessing stuff like this rather than some of this willy-nilly bullshit?
On that point, I'd love to shout out a dear friend of the show, old colleague, Dr. Damian Patrick Williams.
Yes,
please check out his work on this, because he spent a lot of time on it. He is a brilliant mind. And I'll be honest, I think Damien's okay with me saying this. People like him are incredibly irritated, because you know how like you'll come up with an idea and in his case, you'll warn people about it for decades. And then someone else comes up to you and says your idea as though they made it up. Poor Damien, man. He's doing the good work.
Let's take it back to Tolkien for a second, guys. Because in the conceptualization of this within that universe, if you look into one of these things, a Palantir, you are going to be shown some stuff, but it may not be exactly the right stuff. It may not be exactly what's happening. The things you may see may be created by others who are also using a Palantir, right? So this concept of, once somebody has accumulated all this data, once somebody believes they've got the truth of everyone and they can see what everyone is doing and who everyone is, right? That theoretically can be manipulated by anybody else who has the same, thing of power like that, right? A same list, a same data aggregation platform, right? And also in the story, that is considered not a reliable way to choose your actions, right? So like, I'm just imagining all this stuff happening together. And as you guys are talking about using AI to make some of those higher level decisions based on what exists within that system, I don't know. It just spells trouble with a capital T.
Wait, so you're saying you're against that, or you just think it's another slippery
I'm saying
slope
it's
situation?
dangerous to wield that kind of thing.
It's also not as definitive as its champions would suggest. These are some of the deep philosophical and ethical Rubicons we ran into with the idea of modeling data to predict the future. The one
ring.
Keep it. Don't
No, that was good. That's good.
keep it. The one thing I can disclose about that, and I mean, we mentioned it previously, is the model that I was aware of years back was meant entirely to replicate Afghanistan to such fidelity that you could flip a little variable or one number in this massive set of matrix info, and doing so would show you changes in the system that would have a high degree of accuracy to what would actually occur in the real world. And that is really tricky. That's a level of math and analysis that is Arthur C. Clarke level, indistinguishable from magic. And I agree that, not Magic the Gathering, I agree that it's dangerous because people don't know how to use it yet. At all, right? We know a little bit about it, but it's a lot like
math and magic.
It's a lot like kids finding their parents' guns and being capable of firing them, right? But not knowing that bullets cause damage. So you have to be very careful where you're aiming it, and people don't know where to aim Palantir yet. That's the dangerous thing.
Shoot internally, I think, is what they're going to do. Like, I'm thinking about the actions Israel just took against Iran, that's blown up in the news right now, and literally blowing up across Iran, and with drones in Israel right now. Just like, who had a model that could see that coming, right? I mean, I guess it was in the air, but that's the kind of thing, guys, we've been talking about, like full-scale war potentially coming to Iran, and what does that mean? And the potential nuclear situation that we're in, another one.
Mm-hmm.
Ugh.
Yeah, heard that, Kitty.
Didn't mean to bring up another horrifying thing, but that's maybe just where we're at.
That's how it is. Well, with that, I think on that horrifying thing, cliffhanger. Not really a cliffhanger. We're still sort of approaching the cliff, but it's there. We're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor. Thanks again to Foxillian Fastfoot for that thought-provoking email, and I'm glad you did so well on your project. We'll be back with more messages from you.
We've returned. Folks, we are going to continue, as Noel said, a bit of an exploration of Palantir, and we're doing this with some anonymous firsthand information. So we're not going to identify this friend and neighbor of the show, but we do think this is worth hearing. And we have internally been able to check on this source and verify that they're legit. Here we go. Anonymous says, love how you talked about Palantir today. I tell everyone I know it's the most evil company they've never heard of. Ha 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 ha. I work at Raytheon and we have several contracts with them, especially with their Foundry software. It is insane stuff. Among a lot of other things, it can produce real-time war game scenarios and solutions using satellite imagery of locations of boats and planes around the world. This is absolutely wild stuff. And they use the word ontology to describe how Foundry is built out. Essentially, a live network of data from different sources, flock cameras, government satellites, etc., all working together. It's crazy stuff, man. And I don't know if you know anything about their CEO, Alex Karp with a K, but he's a real piece of work. Whenever I'm in a meeting with Palantir teams, they praise him like a god. And it feels like they're all part of a cult. It is scary. So are we familiar with Alex Karp? I can't remember if we talked about him on air.
Doesn't ring a bell for me. Maybe catch me up.
Yeah. How about this? As Anonymous pointed out, we got permission to share that message on the air, and here is a clip. So we're just going to play a short part of this interview from 2020, and would love to hear what you guys think.
Was there ever a time that you wished you had not done work for ICE?
Absolutely. Completely.
You wish you'd never done it.
No. You asked, is there ever a time? Did I suffer? I've had some of my favorite employees leave.
Over ICE.
Over ICE. I had people protesting me, some of whom I think asked really legitimate questions. I have asked myself, if I were younger at college, would I be protesting me?
It sounds like yes. What is the most valid criticism?
That if you are involved in anything that one instance of injustice doesn't tarnish all instances of justice. And I see this question in every single thing we do. And by the way, not just in ICE, I see this with our work with clandestine services. I mean, our product is used on occasion to kill people.
So there we have Alexander Karp. He is right now, his net worth is over $11 billion. Depending on how the stock market is doing. He's clearly a very intelligent guy, and not all of the quote that we played together is making it into the show tonight, but for the context of what he said right before he said our product is used on occasion to kill people, he was also talking about the context of transparency, technical transparency about how Palantir works is, by his own statements, a priority for the organization. However, transparency about how Palantir technologies are used, that is the part where he says, and he's honest about it. He says, because of the contracts we have with clandestine services, we can't really talk about that kind of transparency, which is tricky because that's cherry picking the concept of transparency. Even if just a little bit, right?
I'd say so.
It's kind of like how the government of China says, we are huge champions of certain rights, economic rights, mainly. Don't ask about the human ones.
Yeah. I'm looking at an article from him, it's from CNBC on June 5th, or, where he's being talked about. And it's this concept of this being really one of the primary driving issues for AI development in these, these defense spheres and offense spheres. The concept that if we don't win this war, this race, somebody else does. And in this case, they're talking about, or he specifically says China will win. So we have to do what we're doing. We're going to do what we're doing. Right. And it's not going to stop.
It's the old atomic weaponry question we brought up in a previous episode. If a gun is going to be inevitably made, even if you have philosophical and ethical quandaries about gun ownership, you would rather be the person with the gun. If there's only one gun and there are 5 people in the room, you want to be the 5th one who's strapped. It's just real politics, zero-sum things. The same concept is applicable to AI right now.
Well, yeah, and if there's a blueprint for a gun sitting at the center of the table, right? And everybody's got to decide, well, should I make that thing? I guess I have to, because they might.
Yeah, and then if you make the gun first, if you cannot move the blueprints, you're going to be like aggressively bullying other people not to look at them. Get your eyes off the table.
Yeah.
So this reminds me of something that is not quite related here, Anonymous, but I think will be of interest to all of us. I ran into a conspiratorial thought a while back when I was working on some sci-fi stories. There are people who genuinely believe that true AI, a synthetic sentient intelligence, has already been created, and that the U.S. government immediately murdered it as soon as they learned it was there. It sounds crazy, but what do you think?
I don't know. I feel like they would take it into a secure location somewhere deep underground and interrogate the crap out of it until they
just
figure it out.
Skiff it up and firewall it. Yeah.
Just like they did with aliens. No, I'm just joking.
Right. But it's a fascinating idea because it really depends on how we would describe the inherent philosophy of those inventors, right? And of those military technocrat decision makers. I could 100% see someone creating a sentient mind and then immediately going, we've gone too far, right? We know how to make it now, but we don't understand what it wants or what it does. So we got to kill it before it gets us.
Yeah. It would be a terrifying moment, right? For people in a laboratory situation when it occurred.
Yeah, I remember, and this is all in the world of fiction. We are not experts in these fields, but I remember writing this story where the first sentient intelligence is a little subroutine or program in a popular search engine. And one day, a person who is like a low-level lab tech finds out that this thing is self-aware because she's searching for something, and instead of giving her results, it asks her why she wants to know this information. That, I think something like that would be the real cinematic moment. And if that occurs, then it will inevitably be leveraging things like Palantir. That's part of why it's dangerous. Humans are going to be able to do a lot of damage with this massive data aggregation if they're bad faith actors. But what happens when a sentient AGI gets a hold of it? You know what I mean? What could something so much smarter than human beings do with all that info? And what would it want to do? You know what I mean? What if it's an accidental AI and originally the code was just to like give people tourism recommendations in Monaco, and now it's leveraged all this energy, all this information, it's conquered the world, and it won't shut up about Monaco. That's all it does.
I don't know. I see a scenario where if it's being used for defense purposes, and it would be immediately,
right?
What are the parameters? Is it to protect, this battalion of troops? Is that the first time it's used? And to protect that battalion of troops, well, the best thing to do is to wipe out, the entire area over here. So there's no threat now.
Right. Like the old paperclip problem, right? We made this thing and all it wants to do is make paperclips. However, it is so powerful that it has decided all things must be paperclips,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, it just depends on the parameters. Like what's the mission?
It's a lot too. Like, I think that's a huge part of it, right? We are encoding the imperfect behavioral DNA of human beings into these creations. And, what's that saying? Like, there are no bad dogs. There are only bad owners. So if we are raising this puppy, are we going to teach it to like help people, to be a rescue puppy? Or are we going to teach it to be like a fighting pit bull, no shade on pit bulls? Are we teaching it to be a guard dog? These are very difficult questions to parse. And unfortunately, from everything we've seen throughout history, these are questions that people won't answer until after the fact, Anyway, Palantir, we're going to keep it short today, folks. We hope this finds you well. We're recording on June 13th, a Friday, which means here in the United States, Father's Day is coming up. So in retrospect, we hope that you had a good one. And if you're able to contact your loved ones, we hope you did so. And we know that they were amazed to hear from you. We'd also be amazed to hear from you. Thanks to John in Connecticut. Thanks to Foxillian Fastfoot. And of course, thank you to Anonymous. There's a lot of stuff we didn't get to, especially like how Palantir may accelerate the return to train hopping, which was really interesting thought. Share your interesting thoughts with us. You can find us online. You can hit us up on the telephone. You can always give us a good old-fashioned email.
That's right. You can find us at the handle Conspiracy Stuff, where we exist all over the internet, specifically on X, FKA Twitter, and on YouTube with video content for your perusing enjoyment, as well as on Facebook with our Facebook group. Here's where it gets crazy. On Instagram and TikTok, we're Conspiracy Stuff Show, and there's more.
We have a phone number. It is 1-833-STDWYTK. When you call in, you'll find yourself within a voicemail. You have 3 minutes when you're in there. Give yourself a cool nickname and let us know if we can use your name and message on the air. Guys, The Economist chose Karp as the CEO of the year last year. Isn't that exciting? If you want to write to us, why not instead send us a good old-fashioned email? We are
The entities that read each piece of correspondence we receive. Be well aware, yet unafraid. Sometimes the void writes back. One last shout out from our pal, I think we can say this name, our pal Economics, who had a kind message for us and said, man, I cannot imagine how spicy stuff they don't want you to know is going to get as we move along this awful timeline. Given the recent political climate and all the protests, especially with mainstream media cherry-picking coverage, that's stuff they don't want you to know. Talk about job security for you boys right now. LOL. Thank you for the kind wishes. We're doing our best. We'll see you soon. Conspiracy@iHeartRadio.com.
Stuff They Don't Want You to Know is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, visit the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.